All right, guys, we're going to be going over your automated sales pipeline. This is included in your Built For You account. There's one drip that you really will want to review and make sure you add your Google link to so that it can send your customers your Google review link. We went over this in another video for getting Google reviews, but I'll show you briefly here. So the purpose of this automated sales pipeline is there is automation attached to these first four statuses, but only these two statuses will trigger automation relatively immediately. These two statuses trigger automation much further out in the campaign of the lead, and there's a specific purpose with it. So we'll start here. If you drag somebody in the lead column, there will be no automation that fires out immediately. How this pipeline works is when you drag somebody into this lead column, or you add somebody in the lead column, or you manually place somebody in the lead column by going into their status here and putting them physically into that lead column, it doesn't change their groups yet. What happens in the settings is the system is set up so that when somebody is added to that status, if they sit there for 30 days, it's going to put them in this lead not quoted drip campaign. And disregard all the different drips here. We've done a ton of stuff in this account for teams and all those other things, but it's going to put them into this drip campaign 30 days after they sit in this status. So if they sit in this status for 30 days, it's going to put them into this drip campaign, which doesn't actually start for another 130 days. The goal here is that basically at about 5.5 months, you're going to be re-prospecting this lead as to why you guys never connected on their insurance request or an insurance review or whatever it was. View the verbiage and change it as accordingly if you'd like to. But the goal of this status is it's not going to fire off any drips until about 5.5 months. Again, the reason is we want to try and recycle this lead to re-engage them into a quoting opportunity. The prospect pipeline works exactly the same way. It is not going to fire off any drip campaigns until 1.5 months in, and it's going to turn on this drip campaign. I'm sorry, not 1.5 months, until a month, it's not going to put them into this drip campaign. And this drip campaign is set up to not start until 5.5 months later. They have the same exact time frames. They pretty much have the same exact verbiage, except for on this one, you touched base with the prospect. On the lead, you never touch base with them, right? So that's how these two work. No drips fire off until month 5.5. The proposal pipeline, if I drag somebody into this proposal status, it's going to trigger a quote follow-up campaign. This quote follow-up campaign isn't going to start until the day after they are added into this status. It's not going to start immediately on day 0. It's going to start the day after, because we don't know how that phone call went with the proposed insured or the insured that you sent the proposal to, and what the expectations were binding that day, or what you talked about, or how you went over it, or if you went over it, if you just emailed it to them. So it's not going to actually trigger until the next day. And it's going to trigger a quote follow-up for the next 18 days. And the pipeline is set up so if they sit here for a total of 30 days, it will automatically move them into a quotes not closed campaign, okay? So this quotes not sold campaign doesn't start until 30 days after they're in the pipeline, and then it expires them out of the groups, puts them into this group, and it triggers a quotes not sold. So if you are binding policies, make sure you put them in the sales column so that doesn't fire off, because it won't make you look great if you already sold them. So make sure you're doing that. And that quotes not closed is basically just a last ditch effort to try and get them to bind the policy, okay? Your sale column is very specific. There's one thing you're going to have to change on your sales automation. It's called the onboarding automation. This is how we onboard your customers correctly every time. The purpose of this is to thank them for their business and trust. The next is going over with them a Google review. So you need to make sure you put your Google review link here. If it's too long, use Bitly to shorten it so that it shortens your URL code. And then it also asks for referrals, okay? This is what the onboarding is for. Please add to it as you see fit, change the timing, change the verbiage, etc. But this drip does fire off immediately. The second you drag somebody into this, they will get notified of their onboarding campaign here. And that first drip basically just says, thank you for the trust. over the next few days, you'll be updating them via text and email on how best to leverage the relationship. So make sure you're adding to this drip. You can always add onboarding email campaigns here. So if you have an onboarding drip right here and you have an email connected to the account, make sure that you're editing this onboarding email so that it looks like you guys, all your logos and whatnot. But that is the onboarding campaign, all triggered from the automated sales pipeline. Hope that all helps.